What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright soldiers, in today's video we're going to be going over the Dragoncraft reveals, and I'm very excited to talk about these because I think this is going to be the deck to be playing for this crossover set. It's the most popular, one of the most popular crafts outside of Abysscraft. So let's go ahead and get into these reveals. Alright, so this clan slash clash that's going to be representing Dragoncraft is going to be Kagero, and the Kagero clan from Vanguard is a clan that is a nation of the Dragon Empire, and it's one of the first playable clans right next to Royal Paladins, which is one of the other clans that we talked about earlier. Alright, so it looks like Kagero's playstyle in Vanguard is that they're using fire in its prominence effects to focus on burning your opponent's resources, which is kind of how Dragoncraft works in a way, is that you really want to ramp so you can get ahead very early in the game. So when you get into the mid-game in Dragoncraft, where it would be late game for Dragoncraft and then mid-game for your opponent, you'd be playing bigger boss monster-y cards, which have a big defense line, or they have like a nice way to, swing in for some big damage for all those cards that you lost throughout your hand to turn into extra play points. So you can play those big boss monsters and your opponent's gonna have to take a whole turn to take care of one card. So I'm wondering how that's going to work in terms of line of, the translation from these Kagero cards into Shadowverse Evolve. Alright, looking at our first card, we have Dragonic Overlord the End. So it's a 7-cost 6/6. It has Storm, Ward, and Twin Drive, so it drive checks twice. It also has a strike ability to spend 3 play points to discard a Dragonic Overlord the End. You get to refresh this card. But when it comes into play, fanfare, if there's a Dragonic Overlord in your cemetery, you recover 1 play point. You can also activate by banishing 5 Kagero cards in your cemetery, and you can destroy each other follower on the field. Alright, so this is the boss monster. You can just tell by looking at this and everything that this card looks at and represents. So not only are you swinging for 6 storm damage, if you have those extra 3 play points, so if you manage to cheat this out with other effects, because I don't think you will be spending 7, but like at the same time, Dragoncraft is the ramp class, so we might be just spending a total of 10 play points if we have it, to discard a Dragonic Overlord at the end, which is another one of this card, to refresh this card so you're able to swing again if you're able to. But also having the Dragonic Overlord in your cemetery when playing this card is going to get you that 1 play point back if you need that extra 1 play point. But we're really going to enjoy this activate ability by getting rid of those 5 Kagero cards by destroying everything on the field outside of this card. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot going on. You have 6 storm damage, and then you have the total of 10 play points by getting rid of this same card, and then being able to refresh this card for some more damage. And the fact that this follower is Ward 2 and drive checks twice, so we can do those drive check triggers. So if this follower turns into an 8 damage follower, that's very scary. Alright, next up we have Seal Dragon Blockade. So it's a 2-cost 3/2, and during your turn, whenever an opponent plays a spell, deal 2 damage to the leader, and once per turn during your turn, whenever an Kagero card you control deals ability damage to an enemy follower, you draw a card. Alright, so this card is pretty good in terms of like answering to responsive decks. So not only do you spend 2, and then if your opponent is going to respond to your turn, you can deal 2 damage to them, but also if you have a Kagero card that's going to deal ability damage to an enemy follower, you can just +1 card there. Alrighty, next up we have Burning Horn Dragon. So it's a 2-cost 3/2. It has Rush, and whenever a follower on your field performs drive check, you select the enemy leader or enemy follower on the field and you deal it 1 damage. And when this follower comes onto the field, fanfare, if there's a card with Dragonic Overlord in its name on your field, you give this follower +2/+2. Alright, so mind you soldiers, that there are multiple cards that are Dragonic Overlord in this set, or at least for the Vanguard Kagero stuff. So we're going to be looking at the Dragoncraft stuff now, but of course in the next video that we're going to be doing, there's going to be Dragonic Overlord cards in the starter deck. So if you really want to look into getting into Dragoncraft, I highly suggest you pick up that starter deck before you start looking into these Dragoncraft Kagero cards. Alright, so getting back into this card's ability, so when this card comes into play, this card is going to turn into a 5/4, which is very helpful since this follower is Rush. And most of the things that we do want to look at has 5 defense, and just trading into a follower is very nice. But if you have a follower that does have drive check or is able to perform a drive check, I would highly suggest that. So you can go ahead and get this 1 damage to leader or 1 damage to follower, just in case there's one pesky follower that's been swinging at you the entire game from turn 1 and you didn't have a way to remove it. Or there's a way to just get some damage in if you need to. Alright, next up we have Blazing Core Dragon. So it's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve it for free into a Blazing Flare Dragon, or you can evolve it for 1 and then banish an Iron-Tailed Dragon and a Gatling Claw Dragon in your cemetery, and you can evolve this follower into a Blazing Flare Dragon. Alright, so we gotta love the multi-choice. So if you're into the late game and you don't have the Iron Tail or Gatling Claw in your cemetery, you can always just spend 6 to evolve this follower, which hopefully the spending 6 will be really worth. But if you play the Iron Tail and the Gatling Claw in your deck and you're able to have those into the cemetery, this can turn into a 4 evolve, and you'll be still evolving into the same follower. Alright, so looking at what Blazing Flare Dragon does, so he turns it to a 6/6 and he has Twin Drive, so he drives checks twice. But on evolve, you select enemy following the field and deal it 5 damage, and then deal 3 damage to its leader. Alright, so this is some pretty good removal pieces here, I would say. So for 6, if you want to do it naturally, or for 4, if you want to cheat this out. If you've already have those 2 cards in the cemetery, you're going to be selecting enemy following field and then dealing it 5 damage and 3 to its leader, while also swinging 6 into another follower while you're getting a Twin Drive check. So 2 checks, so you can potentially either get 2 damage on this follower, restand it if you need to, heal, and then you could potentially draw 2 off of those things. Alright, next up we have Dragonic Executioner, so it's a 4-cost 5/5, it has Rush, but when it comes into play fanfare, you discard a Kagero card and then you draw 2 cards. Alright, so for 4, we get to have a 5/5 with Rush, and while we discard another Kagero card, which we should if we're running the Kagero deck, we're going to be plussing 2 cards into our hand, so we really only netted +1, which is fine too, but getting a 5/5 with Rush with 4 removal is just very good. Alright, and then we have Vortex Dragon, so it's a 5-cost 6/6, and when it comes into play, you banish 3 Kagero cards into your cemetery, and then you select up to 2 enemy followers on the field and destroy them. So a reminder, soldiers, that this card did get limited/restricted, so you can only have 1 of this inside of your deck, because I think it'll be a little insane if you're just always spending 5 to get a 6/6 on field and your opponent's going to be scrambling to really get rid of this card, because mind you, it's over the 5 defense threshold, so it's going to be a little harder to get rid of it. So you're building a board and taking maybe 2 or 3 cards to do that, and that's outside of like maybe like 2 followers and then maybe a spell card or a spell card and then a follower that you play, and they just play Vortex Dragon again, and it's like, okay, well, everything I did, it's not really gonna matter. So if you're not playing any Storm followers, I can see why this card got limited. So I'm glad that there was a change here and they're paying attention, and I know there's probably more restrictions to come, so let's look forward to the future on the Vanguard set that comes out tomorrow. Alright, and next up we have Flame of Promise Armo. So it's a 1-cost 2/2, so a little goblin. But when it comes into play, you reveal a card with Dragonic Overlord in its name in your hand, and then you draw a card. See, when we keep seeing cards like this, it's like you must pick up the starter deck before you even think about playing this clan/clash, whatever you want to call it for Vanguard. So make sure you pick up the starter deck so you're able to play these cards as early as turn 1, so you can start digging through your deck and so you can start seeing answers and stuff like that. Alright, next up we have Bellicosity Dragon, so it's a 5-cost 4/4. You can ride it for 1, but on drive you select up to 2 enemy followers on the field and deal 4 damage divided between them, and then you give this follower +1/+1, but when this follower comes into play, you give your leader +2 defense and you draw a card. Alright, so the on drive ability is a little shaky just because you're only dealing 4 damage divided between them, and that's a total of 6 play points, so you really got to think about it when you go for this. But at the same time, when paying 5, you do just give your leader +2 defense, and you do get to replace the card out of your hand. Alright, next up we have Prowling Dragon Striken, so it's a 2-cost 5/5, and this follower can attack enemies, and whenever your drive check triggers an effect for the rest of this turn, this follower loses all abilities. So mind you, this follower can just be on your field at 2, it just can't attack enemies, but as soon as you do a drive check and it triggers effect, you're able to swing with this follower. Alright, next up we have Dragon Monk Gojo, so he's a 2-cost 2/2, you can ride him for 1, but on drive you give this follower +1/+1, and then you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You may reveal a Kagero card from among them and add it to your hand, and then you put the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order, and if Overflow is active for you, may reveal it and add up to 2 Kagero cards instead. Alright, so for a total of 3 play points, if you're not in Overflow, you only get to add 1 card that's a Kagero card. But if you're in those 7 play points, the Overflow, so it's now getting into the Dragoncraft things, which I really like, you're able to add up to 2 Kagero cards, which can be very helpful by just using 3 play points to draw 2. Alright, and next up we have Demonic Dragon Berserker Yaksha, so it's a 3-cost 3/3, and when it comes into play, you can choose one of the following. You can either 1, select enemy amulet on the field and destroy it, or 2, deal 2 damage to each enemy leader. Alright, so I think cards that are able to remove amulets off the field are very sleeper, because Tenko Shrine is a very strong card for Amulet Haven, and just Haven in general really does revolve around amulets if they're not playing the Storm Ward variant. And even in the Storm Ward variant, they have an amulet too, so I can see why the option 1 is very useful in some instances. But also having the multiple choice of being able to just deal 2 damage to the enemy leader if they don't run amulets is very good on a card. Alrighty, next up we have Demonic Dragon Mage Kimnara, so it's a 3-cost quick spell, and then you can select the enemy follower on the field and deal it 6 damage. Am I tweaking? Like, this is a 3-cost card that does 6 damage. I don't know, I know there are 3-cost cards that just straight up remove things, and that's fine, because they're 3-cost cards that just, and usually there's like a, like a requirement, like the card has to be at least 4 defense or less, or, you know, it needs to be a 3 cost or less. But just a 3 cost card just dealing 6 damage can take care of a lot of things in this game. Alright, next up we have Embodiment of Spear Tar. So it's a 2 cost 3/1. Yes, rush and assail, but when it comes into play, fanfare, if Overflow is active for you, you deal 2 damage to each enemy leader, and this card also has the critical trigger. So when this card is flipped by a drive check, you select the follower on your field and you give a +2 attack. Alright, so the one thing I'm actually enjoying about a little bit of the crossover set here is that other decks do get some support here. So this is a Kagura card. Yeah, that's cool. But if you're playing Discard Dragon, where you want to maximize the cards that you play out of your hand by either dealing damage in a way. So if you have Dragomancer's Rights, which is, you know, I think Discard Dragon is like the main dragon deck I do talk about, which is like definitely one of the good ones. I think it's a sleeper pick in terms of dragon decks. But getting back into the card, of course. Just having access to the cards and spending 2 play points to deal 2 damage is very helpful, because that can really help out with numbers. Like, if I'm really, especially, you know, if you're Overflow, when you're in Overflow, you have all those play points. Like, I'm hitting 7, I'm spending 2, I'm dealing 2 damage to you, and then have the rest of the 5 play points that I can play with to really, you know, push in for some more damage or take care of your board. Which is, funny enough, something that Spear Tar does. He's able to swing into those followers too while having that rush and assail. Alrighty, next up we have Gatling Claw Dragon. So it's a 2 cost 2/3. You can activate to engage this card, and then you can draw a card, and this ability can only be activated if an enemy follower was put into the cemetery from the field this turn. And this follower also has the draw trigger. So when this card is flipped by a draft check, you draw a card. So alright soldiers, if you have been paying attention, this is one of the cards that you need in the cemetery for the Blazing Core Dragon. So if you manage to hit this off of a drive check, not only do you get to draw a card for just drive checking in the swing with the whatever follower, so you get to have this in the cemetery, and then you have one of the pieces for the Blazing Core Dragon to go off. Alright, next up we have Lizard Soldier Ganlu. So it's a 1 cost 1/2, and you can activate to engage this card, and you can select the enemy follower on the field and deal it 1 damage. And this ability can only be activated if there is another Kagura follower in your field. You can also activate for 2 play points to refresh this follower, and for the rest of this turn it can't attack enemies. And this follower also has the stand trigger, so when this card is flipped by a drive check, just like the follower on the field and refresh it, and for the rest of this turn it can't attack enemy leaders. Alright soldiers, so I read my comments. I don't answer them all the time, and I apologize for that. I am sometimes just busy at the moment, and I will see them. It's like getting a text message. I see it and then I put my phone back and I'm like, okay, you know, I got other stuff I got to do. But however, I did hear about the stand trigger being the one that needed to be nerfed. I don't know how popular that is, so I want to say I disagree, because here's my example. So I have a 5/5 follower with Twin Drive, and it has Storm. Granted, I do think it is a little outlandish how you're able to swing in for damage and then re-engage it and then potentially swing into a follower. But, you know, that's only in the luck of the draw, and that's sometimes how it really comes to be. Now, I still do think that, granted, like, I don't think you get the Twin Drive twice. It, like, checks and then it activates. Now, if you're able to do it again and you hit multiple stand triggers, then it gets a little ridiculous. But, you know, it really, like I said earlier, it does believe in luck of the draw. It does sound busted, don't get me wrong. Like, especially if you're swinging with that big follower we just saw, the Dragonic Overlord, the Exquisite Requiem. Excuse me, I can't think of his name because I'm thinking of my example. But, you know, the Dragonic Overlord being, like, as big as it is, and then it swings for damage, and then it's able to swing into another follower, and it keeps doing drive checks, and it manages to hit another stand trigger, which, you know, sometimes is highly unlikely, but if it manages to restand twice, you know, like, you're in a situation. But like I said, I don't know the exact instance of how drive checks work all the way, because I do believe we're able to trigger them again if the follower is able to swing again. So if it doesn't work like that, then it's a lot worse than it is. But I'm just thinking of the most broken way, just because, you know, I'm just going off of what you guys think whenever you're watching my content, which I do appreciate. So, you know, I like to have a little conversation going sometimes when we talk about these cards. Alright, next up we have Dragon Monk Genjo. So she's a 1 cost 1/1. She has Ward. When she comes into play, you give your leader +1 defense. And if Overflow is active for you, you give your leader +2 defense instead. And this follower also has the heal trigger, so when this card is flipped by a drive check, you give your leader +3 defense. Alright, so a nice cute little card. If you're playing on the real back end, that's the only time I will see you playing this card. Or, you know, you're going to try and figure out a way of getting this card back into your deck, because this is not the card that you want to be playing for one. Or if you just need a Kagura card to just be played as early as turn 1 to have Ward and you want to stop your opponent's aggression, that's the only time I can see you playing this. But Outside of that, it's not a bad card, but you optimally want to hit this off the heal trigger. Alrighty, next up we have Iron-Tailed Dragon. So with the 1-cost 1/2, you can activate to engage this card and you give this follower +1 attack. Alright, so this follower is very cute. Not only do you get to play this follower for 1 and then engage it and it turns into a goblin, so you can potentially swing in for some damage the very next turn like a goblin would, or it gets answered. Sometimes it happens, but this is another card that we need for the Blazing Core Dragon. So if this card is in the cemetery, you're going to be able to evolve that Blazing Dragon for 4. Alright, and next up we have Flame of Hope Armo. So it's a 1-cost 2/2, and once per turn, during your turn, whenever an enemy follower is put into your cemetery from the field, you draw a card and then you discard a card. But when it comes into play, you select the enemy follower in the field, and if Overflow is active for you, you deal it 2 damage. Alright, so if you manage to remove followers on your turn only once, as long as this card is on the field, you're able to draw a card and discard a card, which is very helpful for Discard Dragon. I know I keep bringing stuff up, but come on, like, this is support for these decks. So you're able to just, check something and deal 2 damage, and then you're able to draw a card and then discard a card, and by the end of the turn, of course, if you have Dracomancer's Rights on the field, you're able to deal 2 damage to the enemy leader, or another 2 damage to enemy follower if Overflow is active for you and you're able to deal 2 damage to something. Alright, and lastly, we have Lizard Soldier Conroe. So it's a 2-cost amulet, and it's a starter amulet. You can activate to engage this card and put this card into its owner's cemetery. You select the enemy follower in the field and deal it 1 damage, and this ability can only be activated if you have a Kagero follower on your field. Alright, so if your opponent is getting mad freaky on turn 1, of course, the starting amulets are going to be our grade 0s for the Vanguard deck, so we have a response for aggression if we're really afraid of that. But we do have to make sure we have the Kagero follower on field, so we got to make sure we're looking at the Kagero Vanguard deck. So as long as we play our turn 1 follower, something like Iron Tail to turn it into a goblin and then deal 1 damage to an enemy follower on the field if they manage to play one, it's something that you can do on turn 1. Alrighty, and then we have our UR for the set. So anyone who's looking forward to getting this Dragonic Overlord as a UR, I hope you're able to pull it. This is a big boss monster card. Like, look at it, the arms that this card has. It's got 2 swords and a glick. I think it has another glick in its hand, but this is a card to be afraid of. Like, this is samurai with guns. Like, this is the card. I can see why Dragon is very popular, because I love Dragon too. Personally, I do have my gripes with Dragon just because I'm a rune player, but it's just like, Tom and Jerry, So, but this card is like amazing. I know the art is going to rock on this. But alright, soldiers, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for being patient with me when getting these reveals out. I will have the next video out today. I'm putting out 2 videos, and I'm going to make sure we have the starter decks and neutrals and everything done before the set comes out tomorrow. I appreciate you being very patient, but I've been very busy with other stuff, so thank you so much for tuning in. But alright, soldiers, that is it for today's video. Make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight, and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah, TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do. Just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do. Just to get you away. You pull me too close, now we hesitate.